but it's an extension of oneness, the multiplicity, so-called. The world of separated forms is the multiplicity of oneness. And there's many allegories for this. The way a single candle and one small flame could light 1,000 candles or start a forest fire that rages over hundreds of miles. And yet that candle is not diminished in any way. The idea of the union of opposites has some classic examples also, like two sides of the same coin, or the road going uphill is a downhill road. We call eyeglasses a pair because we have two eyes, but a pair of eyeglasses is one thing, just as a pair of gloves or a pair of shoes is really one thing.
Beyond politics and above organized religion, a moral authority exists known globally as the ageless wisdom. It is the study of consciousness, the mystery of awareness, which cannot be measured yet will not be denied. This podcast from Michael Benner's Ageless Wisdom Salon features lessons in metaphysics, mysticism, and esoteric philosophy. Those who attend live on Zoom may also participate in group meditation and roundtable discussions. Register for our newsletter at michaelbenner.com. Welcome to the Ageless Wisdom Mystery School with Michael Benner.
We've talked in the past about the one and the many, and the paradox of the tendency that we have to think in either-or terms. Are we unique individuals, or are we part of one thing? All elements or fragments of one source or creator. An absolute, a philosopher would say the absolute. A religious person would say God. There's other terms, creator, source, prime mover, first cause. The problem is the or. There's something about the human brain. We have a problem with both. We have a problem with and, especially when it appears to conflict or be different at all. How could it be true that we are both the one and the many? And so today's topic is called the union of opposites. It bears on this ultimate concept of non-duality, or Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism. Advaita meaning literally the prefix a meaning not or no. Veda means second. So Advaita means no second or no other. Oneness, wholeness, completion. Sometimes called monism, as distinct from monotheism. Monotheism is what unifies Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Monotheism is one God, a creator, so to speak, that is distinct and apart from its creation, living remotely, above and free of form, and due to the human tendency to project, often seen symbolically or literally as a man on a cloud, very far away and petitionable through prayer. Non-duality says that's an illusion. It's real enough. The material world is real enough. You can't stand on the railroad tracks while the train is coming and say, well, it's just an illusion, it's just a dream. Nothing will happen to me. You'll get squashed like a roach, so it's real enough. I often say the Dalai Lama, for example, knows that time is not real, time is an illusion, space is an illusion, but nevertheless, he wears a watch and has a calendar where he schedules appointments because it's real enough. But it's an extension of oneness, the multiplicity, so-called. The world of separated forms is the multiplicity of oneness. And there's many allegories for this. The way a single candle and one small flame could light 1,000 candles or start a forest fire that rages over hundreds of miles. And yet that candle is not diminished in any way. The idea of the union of opposites has some classic examples also, like two sides of the same coin, or the road going uphill is a downhill road. We call eyeglasses a pair because we have two eyes, but a pair of eyeglasses is one thing, just as a pair of gloves or a pair of shoes is really one thing. I like the example of the apple. If you think that you're an apple, for example, if you compare yourself to being an individual, this apple, unique unto itself, like no other apple, is on a tree with a bunch of very different apples. But where is the awareness that you're part of one tree? And that that tree is rooted in the ground, the common ground of all trees. So are you the apple, separate and unique? Are you the tree? Are you the orchard? Are you the forest? Are you the ecosystem and therefore the entire planet? Are you the solar system? Are you the galaxy, the cluster of galaxies? You are the universe. You are the apple and the universe. It's the and that we have problems with. We tend to think of differences as not only in conflict, but often in opposition. School makes this worse by teaching us that in most cases, and maybe in all cases, there's only one right answer, which of course is absurd, ridiculous, nonsense, and only one right way to arrive at that answer. And everything we begin to judge then as right or wrong. We overlay good and bad and right and wrong and me and everything that is not me. And so the curse of living in form in the material world is believing you're separate and there's something or someone here that is not us. And yet we do have to acknowledge the reality of individualism, that while the one expresses as the many, unity expresses as multiplicity, and ultimately all is one, and the appearance of separation is merely that, it's also true that these separate bits are unique. Every apple, as I said, is a little different. No two snowflakes are alike. Every human being has their own unique DNA. We rarely consider that we are truly incomparable. Comparing ourselves to other people is absurd. You are not. There's no one like you who has ever been here before. No one exactly like you who is here now, nor will there ever in the future be anyone exactly like you. In terms of, let's just say, your DNA or your fingerprints or your particular gifts or talents or abilities or point of view, the way you feel. Is there overlap? Oh, of course. Oh, yes, obviously. Are there ways that we are very much like other people? Yes, most certainly. Can we sympathize and empathize? Yes, yes. I like sympathy, empathy, telepathy. ESP and psychic phenomena also suggests we're all connected on some level. Jung's collective unconscious says the same thing. We have many similar experiences. Oh, dude, I can totally relate to that. I know what you're talking about. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt. It's all true. That doesn't deny the commonality that we share. It doesn't deny the fact that we're also unique. And the fact that we're unique individuals does not deny the fact that we're all from one source and ultimately inalienable. Even our Constitution makes reference to human rights, so-called civil rights, as being inalienable. You cannot be separated from them. It's a philosopher's way of saying God-given. So all of that is true. That's monism. That's very different than monotheism, and increasingly is referred to as non-duality. And so I thought today we'd explore this unity of opposites a little bit, talk about the idea that you cannot have an inside without an outside, any more than you could have an in-breath without an out-breath, any more than a wave could have a crest without a trough. You can't have light without dark. You can't have a foreground without a background. You can't have hot without cold. You cannot have good without the absence of goodness, so-called evil. But again, we overlay right or wrong, good or bad, and tragically make a struggle as if we need to resolve conflicts that do not exist, when we could be dancing, embracing our problems, embracing adversity, embracing our heartache, our sadness, our depression, life's challenges, and dancing in an elegant effort to redeem or uplift or resolve the adversity. And instead we turn it into a tug of war, or simply a war, where the idea is we must defeat evil. We must conquer the bad, as if heat must conquer cold and light must defeat the shadow. And it's absurd. And when you get this, and you begin to live this in your life, and a problem comes up, and you feel your body tightening, and you feel the resistance, and you want to quash the adversity, or you hate the person who hurt you, or a million other examples, you will in time learn to breathe and relax and look for the silver lining, look for the opportunity. Where in this undesirable, horrible, I wish I could avoid this, I would do anything to avoid this. Where in this is the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to be better? That's why we suffer. But we can minimize that suffering and learn the lesson. If in school a teacher gives you a problem to solve, it's you're not defeating the problem. You don't have to kill the teacher. They're not trying to punish you by giving you problems. They want you to learn. The universe is not punishing you when it makes you sick or someone you love dies or you get fired or lose your mortgage or get in a car accident or your dog dies or whatever. It just feels that way. All right. So we're talking about the duality of living in the material world. And the yin and the yang, and the light and the dark, and the male and the female, and the polarities of the bar magnet, the positive and negative polarities of electromagnetism, the coming and the going, the phases and cycles of the seasons and the phases of the moon and the tides, the waves roll in, crash, the water rolls back to the ocean, round and around. But this duality, because of the way we perceive it and label it, often takes the appearance of a good side and a bad side, as if light is good and dark is bad, as if anything that's different is opposite. And this is where the struggle comes from. Trying to turn problems into solutions, or bad things into good things, or change a rainy day into a sunny day because it suits you. Forgetting that we need rainy days. We need problems. We need adversity. How else are we going to grow? How do we improve? How do we learn? But through the challenges presented by adversity. So we often fail to see the duality of life as if it's one thing. And this is where the struggle comes from. So life becomes a tug of war rather than a dance. Interesting thing about the tug of war, or any conflict with a situation or with a relationship, is that we overlay right and wrong and good and bad, as I say, winners and losers, and a particular outcome. We believe there has to be some victory and some loss involved, like everything is a football game or a baseball game. And of course, when we dance through life, when we embrace our problems, you hear me clearly, open ourselves, face the problem, or the undesirable circumstance, or the challenge in the relationship. Face it and embrace it. Bring it to you. Welcome it in. You can guide it across the dance floor with no particular destination in mind, no particular outcome. The resolution is in the dance itself. When you dance with a partner, it's not to get somewhere. It doesn't matter where you begin on the dance floor or where you end on the dance floor. And I think it's a really good allegory for an approach of life when we learn to face and embrace adversity, to welcome it in, to see it as an opportunity to learn something instead of defeat something. So the secret is to look for the balance, to walk the middle way, and to harmoniously blend all of this. Buddhists begin their philosophy with Four Noble Truths, the first of which is life is suffering. And the examples they give come out of a story of Buddha as a young man. He was a prince, and his father kept him on the reservation, so to speak. He didn't get out of the palace much, and certainly didn't get into town until, as a young boy, maybe 14 or 15, he and a stable boy snuck off one day and took a couple of horses and rode into town. And he encounters sickness, aging, and death. He sees a sick person. He's never seen a sick person before. And he says to his friend, "What is this?" And the stable boy explains, this is sickness. And then he encounters aging. He sees an old person. He's never seen a really old person before, bent over, walking on a cane. What is this? And he explains aging to him. And then they come upon a corpse in the street. What in the world is this? What is this? And the stable boy explains, well, this is death. And this has such a profound impact on young Siddhartha. He's never seen any of this, and he comes to realize that life is not what it's been made to be by his father, who's a very wealthy king, and they live in a palace, and they have all this land and everything. People wait on them, and everything seems pretty cool. So he's blown away by all this suffering in the world, and that really impacts him. That really is the story of his life. He devotes himself to trying to find a way to avoid suffering. And in his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he realizes the Four Noble Truths, which is life. First, life is suffering. Secondly, we set ourselves up for it by desiring things to be different than they are. We don't want to accept reality. We want to change it. Number 3, there is a way out of this. You could manage your desire nature. You could accept reality and acknowledge reality. And if you want to modify it or change it or improve upon it, that's fine, but first you need to accept that it is what it is. And there are opportunities to learn in it. And then the 4th Noble Truth is the Eightfold Noble Path, which is the 8 different ways to live your life. And they're mostly virtues. They have to do with the study of the mind, understanding the mind and the games that the mind plays, the nature of the ego, the mistake of seeing ourselves as separate and distinct from the world, seeing there is me and then everything that is not me. The mind does that. So you study the mind, you get free from that illusion that you're separate and distinct and unique. You get a much more elevated perspective on the truth of who you are as a symptom or an aspect or an element of one big thing that is the universe. You're not separate from it. The study of the mind is part of the Eightfold Noble Path. The search for wisdom is another, and the embodiment of virtue is another area. Well, it's basically, be kind and generous and loving and forgiving and compassionate and those types of things. And this is a cornerstone of Buddhist philosophy. What it breaks down to, sometimes it's called the one and the many. And it's resolving the paradox that the one, the universe, this one whole thing, whatever it is, I would call it infinite consciousness, manifests itself as a multiplicity of forms. People and trees and flowers and, things humans have made, buildings and cars and bridges and sailing ships and then nature, forests and meadows and oceans and rivers and the sky and clouds. But that we don't come into the world, we come out of the world, and that the universe peoples the way an ocean waves. We're a manifestation. We're like a leaf on a tree or an apple on the tree, that we think of ourselves as separate. And again, then there's me and then everything else, and I'm locked in the struggle with illness and disease, but it could be many things. If you were perfectly healthy, it'd be something else, and there'd be relationship problems, there'd be problems with work and career, and finances, and it just goes with living that there is no one that avoids adversity. There's always something that comes up. And instead of seeing it as other than and in need of conquer or defeat or control, you recognize that it's all part of one thing and that you're not separate other than by appearance. So you could argue that this apple is not that apple. There's a bunch of apples on the other side of the tree that are not you, but you're all part of one tree. And even if you identified yourself as the tree, not the apple, it's likely there's an orchard. And you're really not the apple, you're not the tree, you're the orchard. Then you realize the orchard is part of this whole environmental ecosystem. Trees and other plants play a role with animals, a symbiotic relationship exchanging oxygen and carbon dioxide, providing nutrients, food through fruits and nuts and berries and so-called vegetables. This is how we get the minerals from the soil to nourish ourselves. It's through these plants. We rely on them. Without the plants, we could not be. And so how does intelligence rise out of rocks?